And welcome to SharePoint Dev Weekly. This is episode 49, and we do have a visitor this time around as well. Let's actually start with our visitor. Well, who are you? Why are you here?
Oh, me? Oh, okay.
Why are you here? Like, this is the best thing to ask a visitor. Like, why are you here? Why you guys invited me?
On my calendar, I decided to join the Teams meeting. The usual thing.
Show up in Teams. Okay.
Two clowns on Teams with their videos on. I'm Jeremy Thake. I'm a principal PM on the Microsoft Graph team. I've been at Microsoft for a total of 4 and a bit years now. I did Boomerang. I left and came back. I went to a startup called Hyperfish. And prior to actually working at Microsoft, I worked at another company called AvePoint. So I've been in the SharePoint space
for a long time.
2003.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, although I still consider myself in the SharePoint space. I demo SPFX at conferences, but I'm not in it 100% of the time now.
Yeah, makes perfect. but you're representing the Graph APIs, and what's your kind of a job around the Graph? So how would you clarify that?
Yeah, it's the hard thing to explain, but I think the easiest way to explain it for people that are outside is that the Microsoft Graph API is essentially one API that you can access all of the products and services inside of Microsoft 365. And the challenge with that is the way that engineering is broken up is into the individual products. So I can walk into building 32 and meet the Exchange Outlook team, and there are people in that building, trust me, that own the mail and calendar and contacts APIs. But then in another building, in 34, there's people that own the SharePoint APIs. In another building in Bellevue, there's people who own the Teams APIs. And so there is a central team, which we own, that I report to. Yinarinas has been doing the graph for a long time, that basically see the graph as an overall thing and not in the individual APIs that ship at the graph overall. And so we own all the developer experience for the whole of the graph. So the SDKs, the docs, the developer portal, the quick starts tutorials, the engagement, which we're improving on in Stack Overflow and GitHub, as well as shipping samples and all our presence at events and blogging and podcasts and interacting with other communities in Microsoft like you guys.
Like us.
So, yeah.
And I have to ask because, well, one thing what's actually kind of funny, because still every now and then people are, they kind of tell that, yeah, Jeremy Thake, that guy that in the Graph is responsible. Do you know him? And it's like, yeah, I know. Quite well,
actually. Yeah, kind of.
Sometimes get a mail from him.
Yeah, let's not comment what we're chatting in Teams, but that's a private.
Probably both get fired.
But yeah, so you used to be in the dev marketing of SharePoint.
Yeah, that's right.
At some point.
Yeah, so then
Office 365 developer marketing.
That's right. Like I was Umbrella again, so I used to own messaging for Office add-ins. Teams wasn't even around then, which is amazing when you think how far that's come. SharePoint add-ins was the big thing that I helped launch, and then I started to review what was going on when SPFX was being talked about internally, and I think the empathy towards developers for me steered me to the point where I couldn't hand on heart after spending 3 years talking about add-ins, switch and say, let's just talk about SPFX now. And so I had to look for another role because I couldn't do it in myself. And there's learnings for that for sure. But it's incredible to see the adoption SPFX has had and how much developers that were on all these completely different stacks in .NET have moved and adopted the JavaScript world and brought worlds together. I was just at SharePoint Fest here in Seattle last week, and it was a really good event. And there was managed code developers, and then there was Mark Rackley. I'm kind of joking, but I'm not. But it's those two worlds where you had Mark Anderson and Mark Rackley and a bunch of people for years and years writing, and they kind of admitted they were on the boundary of like hacking in content editor web parts, where now they play in the same world that the people that were going, no, you must do things by full trust code and be able to automate these for environments. And like those worlds have combined now with SPFX, which was really cool to see. And I dropped into a few sessions last week, and it was really nice to see those guys all in their zone talking the same way rather than before talking in different ways.
Yeah, there was so multiple different stories, and then even the internal engineering story was different. And I think that's one of the beauties of SharePoint Framework, because we actually use SharePoint Framework internally as well.
It's genuinely 1P3P. And it's the same story with the graph. Like one of the ways I'm trying at the minute to pitch the graph, because people are like, what is the graph, Jeremy? Is I open up Outlook and new email and start typing VES. Now that's probably a bad one to use as an example, but and Waldek is too. But if I typed in Paul and there's 10,000 people with the name Paul at Microsoft, it's going to put Paul that I've worked with or collaborated in documents first in that to suggestion, and that's all powered by the graph. And so the graph is all over our own first-party experiences, and therefore you as a developer can use the graph for your own third-party experiences, as we call it.
Absolutely. But obviously the graph is always I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but it's the nature of graph. Promoting a graph is hard because it's an API. It's the Graph Explorer, right?
It's under the covers. The sexiness is in if you're building a mobile app that shows it off, or a web app that shows it off, or
well, I guess in the end it depends to whom you talk, right? Because if you talk to devs who have experience with EXO and SPO and Planner, or maybe not, but even things like EXO and SPO, like two services to which you have to do everything by yourself, manage tokens, and then there is Graph, like one way, consistent way to access, and you're like, I want that. Because it just makes sense, right? And especially now when we have end teams and Planner and tasks and emails and calendar, and you can just tap into all of that with a few calls, but with the same auth layer. I mean, we all know the hardest thing. I mean, I'm not sure if the hardest things is dates and time zones formatting or auth. Like,
as someone who lives in America, where we only really care about America, it's like dates, time zone. You don't live on our time zone, right?
Even in America, you have like 4 time zones, 5 time zones. Exactly, right? So, but I mean, so like the first thing you want to do, something against the Microsoft Cloud, is what? Auth, because it's not anonymously available. And for people who have no experience with auth, that is like a huge block, right? And then imagine you have to do it not only once, but 2 times or 3 times, because you want to talk to Exchange and something else, and then something else.
And they have a different way of doing that. Yeah,
exactly. And then there's this cool alternative of Graph, right?
Yeah, and the benefits of the auth flow, really, with what the Microsoft Identity team have done, is not just for devs, it's for IT pros as well. Like a lot of the discussions we have what we call executive briefing calls and meetings directly on campus with CTOs, CIOs of extremely large global companies. And a lot of the time, they just want to know at any point in time what third-party applications are calling and getting access to their data. And so with what Microsoft Identity have done by moving to OAuth 2 and having to register an application and getting that client ID and having a client secret, and more importantly, when the user goes to call an API, they're going to have to consent it, or an admin's going to have to consent it for the org, that gives the IT and execs full visibility at any point in time of what people have access to. And that's the app security for us is just a really important thing. And it did mean that there was a larger barrier to entry to get in than throwing a username and password in, which is, hey, in my consultant days back in Australia 10, 15 years ago, we used to do that, right? Like that was what was in the web.configs. Whereas now it's client secrets and certificates that we do. But the interesting thing is there's work, our team has done in the last year, specifically on top of the awesome work Identity have done with the new MCell libraries, to get that down to 1 or 2 lines of code for the 80% scenarios. And some of the new Graph Toolkit stuff we've done with the People Picker we just launched 2 weeks ago, you can get a People Picker working in an SPFX web part in literally 2 lines of code now, which is, is really cool. And there's a bunch of other things we're doing that are UI powered by the graph that SharePoint developers can get use of straight away. And obviously the work Vesa's engineering group did, all the PMs over there, Luca and Pat and so forth, with the SPFX side of the house on the graph client that's built into SPFX, makes it super easy to go consume that. And so the graph is, if you're a dev and you're still kind of going, I've got my SharePoint blinkers on and I'm only looking at the SharePoint world, career-wise. And I said this a long time ago even when I was in marketing.
You need to think what you say next. You need to think.
Yeah. You need to think broader than just SharePoint. Take those blinkers off. And,
yes.
You know, I know it's easy to think about, well, we can just call the SharePoint REST APIs or CSOM. But starting that muscle of using the graph now, once your internal business unit who's asking for new features, or you're an ISV building wants to use Planner or Teams or anything else that's on the graph, you'll have that muscle and it's easy for you to go use.
Yeah,
makes perfect sense. And we're finally getting there where the coverage of the graph is sufficient for the many areas, and that's been a burden. And that's taken a while, obviously, because it's a significant investment from Microsoft side as well.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. Like, I mean, there was always gaps as we've evolved any kind of platform or decided to replat a platform. And so, you know, SharePoint APIs have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And Graph obviously is only 3 years old, and OneDrive was the files API on the Graph was like the big push. But, you know, if I had $1 for every time someone had asked me for taxonomy APIs or APIs, I'd be a rich man by now.
That's coming.
And so one of the things we've been doing is, you know, again, different engineering teams. There's the SharePoint engineering team that work with their own SharePoint user voice, and Outlook have their own SharePoint user voice, and then Graph has one. And we've tried to get better at making sure that, you know, there's easier visibility to see that is actually coming to the Graph, and not to carry on using APIs that have existed for a long time. I try and steer away from the word legacy API, but the reality is, you know, in all honesty, we want everything on the Graph. We don't want you to using other APIs.
So I will put you here a little bit on the spot, because I know there's plenty of folks who are like, guys, why don't you just expose everything? Can you talk a little bit like how much work goes into that? Imagine that we have taxonomy in SPO or permissions or webs. How much work would it go to have that exposed in Graph?
Yeah, and there's a few ways you can explain it. I think the easiest way to understand it is that the way the Graph was built was as this pretense that we have an API review council, which Yoda sits on and the Grand Jedi sit on, and any engineering team comes to us and they get out their lightsaber. No, trailers were awesome at the weekend.
This API, you will get notes.
Yeah, it's head. But no, they actually review the APIs and the shape. And so Daryl Miller, Mark Stafford, Peter Chagaski, Steve Anderson, there's a huge bunch of people, Dan Kershaw as well, that you're seeing all the GitHub issues and presenting at Build and so forth. They sit on these councils, and we make sure that the shape of the APIs, the formatting of the responses makes sense. But more importantly, in most cases, that API will return a user object. We want it to return the same user object that the rest of the Graph returns, not weird user object that Intune thinks makes sense compared to the user object the Exchange team thinks makes sense. And so that's why we can't just necessarily just shoehorn an existing API into the Graph, because the standards it just doesn't meet, and it doesn't reuse objects that exist.
Yeah. So if we compare, for example, classic CSOM API surface, it's quite messy, to be honest, because it's an end result. But there's an interesting internal engineering process. How do we get to the CSOM API in general? But it's not consistent. The API design isn't consistent as it is with Graph, which is a benefit for the developers, right?
Yeah, because the whole premise is it shouldn't just be shared auth. It should be that if I've written against the files API, it should be really easy to go running against Planner. I shouldn't have to relearn what is batching and Delta querying and is change notifications and just general querying. And OData does a lot of that for us. And actually the same team that own the OData spec own the overall Graph API spec too. And so that's why we have a lot of alignment there. But yeah, that's the main reason. It's just that the way that we're going to ship the taxonomy, managed metadata, I don't know what you guys call it these days, API is that Jeremy Kelly is working with the engineering team over there on making sure it's Graph compliant, and also it's a good opportunity to rethink like
the right API implementation.
Is it just CRUD we need, or are there other methods that make sense to stop the round tripping and inefficient calls that, hey, we could just do this and make this a way more efficient call. So it is frustrating. I know that you have to juggle between Graph and existing APIs, but things take time, I guess, and we don't want to ship something that then we go, we're going to change it in a year's time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're saying that there won't be a Graph V2 endpoint? No, just kidding.
No. I can actually tackle that a little bit. We get asked that a lot, and
really,
we have this notion of beta and V1, and we have things that have been in beta for nearly 2 years. The Insights APIs, which essentially replicate what the Delve UI does, or what SharePoint Home does, or Office.com does, in terms of like files trending around me and people I work with. That API team have had to evolve as those products have evolved and as search has evolved, and we've never felt comfortable shipping it into V1 because of that. But ideally, that wouldn't be a beta API. That would have been like an alpha API or something in between. And then I guess the next thing is like we have APIs that have been in production now for 3 years, and we would like to rev them and then provide new changes to them. And so, we are looking at what that means for a V2, and we have engineering teams that are putting pressure on us to say, look, we want to change this shape, or we want to deprecate this API because we have this new call API that's a good replacement. And so that's all being discussed at the moment. There are no timeframes on that, and obviously it will go through the same journey that beta to V1 does with APIs. It will just mean that we'll jump to V2, and there's a good group of MVPs and regional directors that have been giving us good feedback externally as well to make sure, to keep us in line and make sure we're doing the right thing by people for the graph. That one does come up a lot.
But it's interesting when you think about it. So if you're an external, let's say, consumer of the API, you don't necessarily think the challenges of the versioning of these APIs. And it's really, sure, the graph is a relatively new example, but if we could do an older example, let's say SP Web. And SP Web has a method which is being exposed using CSAM and REST. We cannot change that. That's it. It's locked. And it's basically has been, it's shipped since 2013 we introduced CSAM. Or 2010 partly. So since then, it's basically locked because we can't break the existing investments, which is a really hard thing to then figure out. And then you need to think through when is it a real version move over, and how do you do backward compatible versioning and all of that.
Well, but I guess from that point of view, another thing that might be even more worrying or more complex are changes that you would introduce in the database layer. So not even in the API, but imagine you need to change type of something, or you want to add a column that's really required, but maybe not. And then the API surface is exactly the same. Everything has to work, and then there's this kind of new thing you bolted on, and then test that against everything that people have built on top of SharePoint since 2010 or whatever, right?
And we're finally getting to the point, and we're still learning around. Daryl Miller, excuse me, is a peer of mine who's building out all the SDKs that have had significant improvement in the last year, where we're starting to build test engines and mock frameworks around it so that we can validate that the metadata that we publish, which defines the API, when we generate the SDKs, that the expected results are those expected results that come back each time. And so, it's definitely been a journey we've been on to kind of mature this. And I guess one thing I've learned from being at Microsoft in the time frames I've been at is the external perception that we have tens of thousands of developers sitting there waiting for a command.
What? You don't?
and that, in actual fact, like the team that we work with to do all the developer experience work, including the SDKs, is like 8 engineers. And so, there's a lot that gets done that generates all those things I listed that we're responsible for. And sometimes I get frustrated because it's like, just get this done and out. But it just takes time. And because the graph is, and because the graph touches so many teams, like I think there's 80 different engineering teams I work with now. It only takes one of those teams to go, I think I may have to put the red button on, and then it just stops everybody. And that's the notion of the program manager role, is just to juggle that, which I love. I love that that aspect of complex problems like that, which is cool.
And then, well, as a PM as well, you get those random emails saying, "Hey, we were doing this, so just want to confirm that it was the right thing to do." And you're like, "No, no, don't.
And then you have to go back and think, like, how did they get there, and what can we do to improve docs and samples and so forth to make sure they don't get led in that path. So it's every day is a new surprise basically in this role, but it's fun. I really enjoy it.
It's really hard to predict what you're going to do tomorrow, because you never know.
Well, there will be another email.
We are, as a Microsoft, we are quite.
Does everyone know Vesa's email address? I just we're sure.
Yes. Rickwall at.
As long as there are your emails with Dear Vesa, I will reply on them. Now, we're amazingly still a quite email-focused company in many things, but actually there is a clear, let's say, transition to move towards Teams. It seems to be now happening. With Yammer, it wasn't really there. It was Wildfire there, and then people weren't using that too much. But Teams clearly has a much more significant impact.
Yeah, I find, especially working over multiple regions like we have a developer center now in Nairobi in Kenya, and then one in Bangalore in India. And, Daryl works out of Montreal in Canada. So there's a lot of different, and then Dan's in London. And so between that, like knowing the difference between should I send an email or should I send an instant message, which, it's Skype for Business, like it's just been rebranded Teams. But I think the benefit
it's much more than that. Come on.
Okay, all right. The video finally works.
That's true.
And calls stay up. But I feel like the introduction of channels takes what Skype for Business was to that other level, where as long as people do it, where they don't have those individual one-on-ones, or they create these mammoth one-on-one chats and add people to it, and actually try and find a channel where it makes sense to have that conversation, everyone's part of it, or can at least voyeur if they're part of the team and read it. And I think that's a lot of the benefit email got, but it makes it optional, whereas I think just adding all these DLs into emails on a 2-line is just a joke. And so I feel like with Teams, you have to be a little bit more sensitive to this is instant. People are treating it that way. And that's that difference between when to send an email, when to engage on Teams.
Now, we're about running out of time, but so let's try to be strict on that one. But one thing what I wanted to get back on the earlier discussion, what you said, because it actually has a quite significant impact on SharePoint, is the fact that we start demanding app IDs and OAuth in the calls. And OAuth as part of the SharePoint framework, starting on 1.4 the Graph 1.6. Graph APIs 1.6, yes. I should know this, but anyway, you can easily access the Graph APIs and everything else. But that's actually one of the things why, and coming back on your customers and enterprise customers saying that they need to know what's actually hitting their APIs, and that's precisely why we need to teach our developers to move away from script editor web parts and content editor web parts and all of those hacks, because that's not a reliable way of doing anything. Right.
It definitely gives you more visibility this way. That's for sure. Yeah. And Mike Rackley and I were having a discussion last week. He had a customer talking about this notion of if you want an SPFX web part to call the graph, it still needs to go through the same consent process. So, if you want to access the calendar, in the admin center of SharePoint, you have to bless the application ID to say, okay, now the users can access calendar with this app ID, which is what the graph client inside SPFX uses. And so you're in control of that. And if you want to get more granular, you can use isolated web parts too to, obviously you're going to lose a little bit of experience by doing it, but you can isolate what gets access to what in your SharePoint pages. But it gives you in control. Whereas, if you're using API has been around a bit longer than that, you're not going to have that granularity of access, and someone can't push the big red button to stop the calendar API from being used in the SharePoint page, whereas this gives kind of empowers the admin. Absolutely. So there's a lot of benefit there for sure.
Yeah, centralized control is a big thing. Absolutely. and understanding what's running where and what are they actually then hitting. Now we're running out of time, so I don't have a hard stop. Do you have a hard stop, by the way?
I don't actually.
Okay,
No.
so
This is great.
we can actually. This is a good discussion. This is really interesting discussion, and then we have a like 10 to 15 minutes community article still joined after this one as a one show. But that's fine. In general, let's still try to wrap things up. What's on your calendar, Jeremy, next? What are you, something you can tease with us?
The team, the way the graph works, which is similar to your org. Well, actually, no, it's dissimilar because you have SharePoint Conference as well. But we run on Build and we run on Ignite timeframe, so every 6 months. And so Ignite's the next one for us. Build, we had great kind of set of things we're announcing. I think we've already let the cat out of the bag that this is coming, and I demoed it on stage in the keynote, which was both a fun and terrifying experience for me, quite honestly, being on stage with Rajesh, who's my EVP. We demoed this notion of, we've all used to search. We've had SharePoint on-prem with Fast, where you could ingest content from non-SharePoint and OneDrive areas. And, we're going to give developers the ability to connect to other systems and have that part of your Microsoft search experience, which shows up not just in SharePoint search, but in Outlook search and Team search and wherever you see a search bar internally at Microsoft. And so for me, I think being able to reveal more of that story at Ignite is super exciting. That team is on fire right now, to say it's an understatement.
No, in a positive way. In a positive way.
Not like they're literally on fire, because I wouldn't be here. I'd be putting them out with the fire extinguisher. But they're doing a really great job. And what's amazing with search is that's another thing where there's like 14 different major engineering orgs that are working on search. It isn't just one team.
There's the X-Fast Norway.
Right.
There's where Mikael Svensson went. We've been having Mikael a few times on the show and talked about his journey on Microsoft.
Yeah. And so just seeing that all go on, I think the graph playing a big part in the way that you configure and ingest that content is really exciting. And so I think Ignite, that's going to be the big thing. Personally, I think will land really well.
And that was really important thing what you said there as a side note, was to configure as well as a graph API.
Correct. Yeah. So, everything's graph. There's a bunch of our workloads. That's the bit that is taxing for us, is getting these guys on from the other teams and having them on board and be part of the stories. It's tax on them that they're like, oh, we could just do this ourselves and ship our own API. And it's like, no. There's a few things you need to go do to get this on, and trust me, the benefits are you're going to get all these SDKs, and that's the other thing I think I'm really excited about is we'll get a PowerShell SDK by Ignite for the whole of the graph. So there's a lot of work that I know Waldek has been involved in the Office 365 CLI, where essentially we're going to auto-gen the entire surface layer of the graph as a PowerShell SDK. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is Jeffrey Snover, who's a technical fellow at Microsoft. There's not many technical fellows, but Jeffrey is actually in our org and reports to my 3 skips up manager, Jason Henderson. And so I've been catching up with Jeffrey recently, and so has Daryl. And as one of the founders in major influences of where PowerShell is at Microsoft and outside of Microsoft, he's now jumping in and getting involved there. And so it's going to be really exciting to see, having someone that's been in that environment for so long. And we're working with external people too, but just having Jeffrey involved is cool too. So those 2 things are the things I'm most excited for the graph to, reveal more of. We've talked about both in the past, but to reveal more of it Ignite is really, really exciting. And I think, especially PowerShell, there's a lot of developers that use PowerShell to spin up things as part of a continuous integration, continuous deployment. But there's a lot of admins out there that manage their tenants using the graph and have built all sorts of funky PowerShell scripts that now they can just use commandlets that we generate and know they're going to work and be easy to use, which is cool. And it'll be a match made in heaven against the Office 365 CLI, because I think it's just a case of there will be
counterpart, basically.
It'll clean up some of your stuff so there's less code and just calling out commandlets, and you wrap around it, joining those things together to make sense in the way you're shipping things. So it's really cool, I think.
Absolutely.
And I mean, Waldek has to write less code, which is good for everybody.
I don't think Waldek actually writes that much code on CLI anymore. There's so many contributions actually on the community and open source side of the house.
I mean, so, I think it stays in balance, right? I mean, recently I was away for 4 weeks, so I didn't write anything at all.
Yeah.
But before that, I mean,
smart as well. Family first.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it takes time to arrive to that point that, well, taking a break of digital life makes sense.
What did you do? Were you like delete your mail app off your phone?
No. So basically, I turned off everything that would notify me of anything. So no notifications, no toast, not alerts, none at all. Like if I wanted to access to see email or Twitter, it was there. I mean, there was nothing. There was nothing putting urgency on me. Like you need to do this now.
Yeah.
Nope. Right. So basically, I spent 4 weeks watching movies, enjoying the nature, reading books.
That's good fun. What was the best movie you watched in 4 weeks?
So actually, last
one
2
I
weeks,
would watch.
I'm watching the 100. I don't know if you know series about the 100 youngsters. Yeah, got me in. It's like I watched first episode and I was like, I don't know, but then I watched another one and I was like, this is good. Like I need to. And now I think I'm in season three or something. So it's good.
It's an really underrated show, but yeah.
Is that a Netflix thingy?
Yes.
I need to check it out. Okay, I need to check it out. Yeah. We've
100.
been trying to find a next series with my wife to watch. We don't have too much time watching TV together, but it's like always watching a series. So having the one thing which you will both agree that I'm not watching that and she's not watching that, we'll watch it together. So because we need to have those series as well.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I think that's a good time to wrap up the call. So thank you, Jeremy, and we'll definitely get you again on this show later on because it's always good to chat with you. We've been working together now for almost a decade every now and then. So
that's right.
Which is
we have the grey hairs to prove it. It is a long time.
That's true. And thank you, Waldek, and great to have you back from the summer vacation. So definitely, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the watchers, and we'll come up with a new SharePoint Dev Weekly.
Oh, let me promote my M365 developer podcast too. So if you don't like video and don't like seeing an ugly mask, www.m365 developer podcast. It's me and Paul Scheiferlein, who's an MVP. He's been MVP for 10 plus years.
Quite a long time. Yeah, that's true.
And we interview a lot of people on campus, but we also interview a lot of MVPs and regional directors and people out there in the industry. I listen to lots of podcasts because I can consume them on my commutes. And so if you haven't checked out these, I'd highly encourage you to have a listen. We cover all things M365 as well. So it's not just Graph, it's SharePoint, Teams, Office add-ins, and Azure and beyond.
Yeah,
and we're getting a lot of actually requests. We're getting a lot of requests.
You can just like keep
releasing these as. We're getting a lot of requests also on getting these one out as a podcast.
You should totally do that.
Because there's a high demand, obviously, the communes when you're traveling or walking outside with the dog, which I do a lot. That's actually the time when I'll listen stuff.
Why would you do? No, that sounds to me like a perfect time to think. Like no input, no input. Think.
Okay. Whatever. And actually, this is not the closing of this week's episode. We still have 8 different articles, community articles. There's a SharePoint Saturday, Central Europe coming up the next Saturday, and we'll go through that one and the speakers, and then the community articles right after this one. But thank you, Jeremy, for
after break, right?
After a break. Yes, after
commercial break.
Commercial breaks.
Jeez, how do you guys get anything done? It's like giggling school children.
But thanks, Jeremy. So let's flip to the next part of the episode. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
So, this week we have a SharePoint Saturday Central Europe. I think this is in Zurich, if I remember correctly. And there's been a lot of actually promotion on this one, at least in the Europe side of the house, which is always good. It is in Zurich, and I think it's going to be a really cool setup. I was there actually, when was it? A year ago or something like that. So really, really nice location. I was actually, the Zurich, I think the Central Europe was right after the what was it? SBC, because I
Was
flew
it?
from. I think
was
yes,
it
SBC, and
was
then
it
we had this
before?
one, and then ECS. No.
Right. Yes, you're right. Yeah. Yes. You're right. It was like one or back-to-back chain of events.
Yes, which is always super fun for the people who are traveling over. But there's a lot of really well-known people and speakers in this one, so it's going to be probably quite awesome session. Really sad that I couldn't actually make it, but hey, it is what it is. You can't be in all of the locations. So really cool setup. Now let's go to the articles then. So let's actually start from here. People picker component of craft toolkits in the SharePoint Framework web part. So, and this is from Siddharth, and this is really around using the craft toolkit. Has a craft controls, which will make the implementation of craft-based UX super easy. And you can easily use those in the SPFX web part as well. But basically, it's adding the MTT craft toolkit to your solution, and then basically adding that controller on the page, and voila, it just starts magically working after logging in. So not necessarily a super cool and polished UX experience, but it shows the simplicity of the controls. Absolutely.
Yep.
Cute, really cool setup. Then this one, add a share to Microsoft Teams button to your SharePoint sites from Shayo. Basically, what it means is that and have an extension on a SharePoint site to share a link into Microsoft Teams. So pretty cool setup. So it actually then sends the link on the Microsoft Teams.
And actually, we haven't seen it before, but it seems like he runs the same thing or something that looks exactly the same way on this side, because there's on the left there's a little thingy with a T.
Yeah, let me actually.
You can
yes,
share.
There it is.
Share.
I got it. So
yeah, but I mean also on this side, all the way to the left, there's also this little T on his blog.
Oh, there is.
There you go. And yes, so I think it's exactly the same thing, or at least it looks like the same thing.
Yes, it is. Wow.
There you go.
Yeah, so this is the Teams standard sharing capability, and basically starting that. Oh, that's really cool, actually. That's I wasn't aware of that. So, and then the story here is that how do you add that one floating on the modern pages. One thing maybe to notice here is that he's using this kind of an absolute floating mechanism to get the themes in the right location. Oh, I didn't have mistake.
Yes, there.
There it is. Let me actually do it in arrow. So basically having that floating all the time on the left when it's a modern page, which is a really cool implementation. Technically, there is no standard extensibility point for doing that. So it is kind of it's taking dependency on the DOM structure of the page, but.
Well, I mean, you could do it in a way that you would attach it to the placeholder DOM element and then use CSS to move it around.
Absolutely.
But the problem with that is that if you had two different things from two vendors, they could overlay each other. Like there is no, as you say, there is no structured way of doing that. So like they could overlay, they could look bad, they could like one could hide another. So there is really no robust way of doing it, if you like.
Now, to be fair, maybe that's something which we should have a look on in our team to have a robust way of doing that. So if there's a multiple, like you said, it looks really cool, it works, that's not the problem. But if you install two different services from two different providers, maybe they start collapsing, and then we have a problem.
Maybe that is exactly the whole point, right? Because we currently have the header and the footer, and maybe from a design point of view, these are the locations advised for us to use for these things, and not something just floating all over the screen.
Well, sure, but then if you have an additional header, the additional header would be above this section in here, so it wouldn't be in an optimal situation for the operation here.
Well, I mean, from the requirement point of view, it would be visible at all times.
True, but it would actually pick
bump
the site, bump the whole thing down, and it would have any implications, everything else. So
of course.
I'm just saying that maybe we, in our side, in our team side, also based on the feedback from people, we should actually think through that we would introduce a guaranteed floating locations, and then if there's multiple ones, then they will be just stacked.
Pop up, compress, expand. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or there would be a arrow based on the right side of the screen. When you click that, you get all of the different contextual applications on the page or something like that. So just obviously brainstorming, but maybe something to figure out how to make
ship it.
Yes, let me take a few notes. We'll ship it by next week. Now, let's move in here. Be schizophrenic at debugging SPFX2. So Edge Canary revision. So basically, this is really around how you use the profiles and how to make the profiles to work within your Visual Studio Code as well. So Yannick has really made a detailed investigation how the Edge actually work and how the profiles work, and then what would be the setup of having then multiple different profiles by default available in the Visual Studio Code. So really cool explanation and super useful, absolutely, because then you can start debugging directly in Visual Studio Code and start from there. Which is, by the way, something we should have a video on how to do this kind of a debugging in the easiest way guidance.
Didn't we have it already? I mean, we probably back in the day we have it with Google Chrome. Yeah,
that's true. Anyway, moving on things. Office 365 group search web part. Office 365, there should be a space over there, but that's fine. So basically using Microsoft Graph to then provide a group search experience, a custom experience. So you're able to then search those groups which you might be a part of. So if you're part of multiple groups, you can then filter down on and finding them. Kind of cool web part, absolutely. And then you're able to get to the email and the email power apps of one node of that group. So really cool stuff. Nice implementation. Good and available in a GitHub as well. So really cool. SPFX basics, opening a link in a new window or in a new tab. So this is something which actually Julie Turner did have a blog post in the past as well, but Corey, it's all about repeating. It's all about finding the right links and writing our information, but it's basically using the data interception equals off in the link. And that means that it's then opening the actual target in the new window. So. And this really comes down on the partial loading of the page. So that's why there's a special handling of the linking in the modern SharePoint. Super important thing, by the way, to document, definitely. This is from UL Chol, Office UI fabric-based 365 encoded images for SPFX project. So this is a tool which you can use to get the data URL or the base 64 encoded version of the images. So you don't actually need to have the image inside of the web part implementation. You can just use the encoded. What is it? What in practice? What encoded image? So the browsers basically then read that string and then basically render the image based on the value. That's what actually happens.
Yeah.
So really cool stuff as well. Now, this one was from Elio, how to get hub site ID for SharePoint Framework. Good reminder. I think Mikael Svensson had something similar as a blog post in the past as well. But basically, what is the easiest way to understand which hub I'm actually associated into and what should I actually need to execute? So you do a site and select is hub site and a hub site ID. So what is, if you're a hub site in this case? So.
Or in SPFX, if you go a little bit above, you can use the legacy page context and get department ID.
Absolutely.
So there are two options.
Yes, there we go. That's where it is. So that basically tells the hub ID where the site is actually belonging to, which is really good. Why is it department ID rather than hub? Never mind, historical reasons. And here, so this one was from Mikael Svensson. Mikael moved into the Microsoft side of the house, but he's still luckily blocking. Can find some time on blocking. So basically, in the highlighted search with part, you are now able to provide your own camel queries. Yay! Yep.
Yeah, and then in a way that brings us to an interesting thing, right? Because the web part's name is fixed, right? It still says highlighted, recent, whatever. But then in KQL, you can do any search query you want, so it can show anything and anything, right? So we should be able now to set it in the title by ourselves as opposite for it to be fixed.
Absolutely. But this is already one step forward on making it more flexible. And the second kind of a logical piece, which everybody is asking, there's quite a lot of votes on that one in user voice, is that I want to define the custom template.
Yes, of course,
because that's still missing. But again, if nothing else, if you can use open source tooling, we do have the search web part available as an open source tooling, which gives you the flexibility of templating and everything else. It's a beautiful implementation. But then, if we want to use first-party experiences, this is enough. Hey, that's now available in the highlighted content web part, and definitely more to come over there as well. And then the last piece is from Mark D. Anderson, using invoke SPO site swap to swap in the root site in Office 365. Is this a dev topic? Well, at least it's a design topic.
Well, I mean, from the solution architecture point of view, it could be something that you have to include.
Absolutely. And the whole point of this one is, I think it's more easily visible in here. You are able to swap that URL or site collection in that URL to the root of your tenant, and then we can take a copy of the site and move it in a different location.
Yeah, and the copy will be done from the original site that was previously on the root.
Yes. Absolutely.
So the interesting thing is, will it also fix all links to the content and documents? No.
Unfortunately, no. We're looking into making that happen as well. There was but let's see if that will be happening in the future. So it would actually fix the links and do the redirections. That is not yet supported.
Gotcha. So the moment you do that, you have to take into account that there might be some additional work for you to fix.
Correct.
And any links you might have. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Now, the logical next question also is that, hey, well, wait a minute. So this is actually really cool. Does this work also outside of the root site? Which is actually a pretty interesting answer. Is
in a way to move site to another, or basically to change URL of a site.
Yes, correct. But right now it is only working on the root side of the tenant, so you can't actually do that. So there's a hard-coded limitation by design limitation that it only works on the root side of the tenant. Is probably the right way of doing that, saying that.
Right.
But it might actually go extended on other side as well. Then we also have, if you have an existing, let's say, classic.
Hold on a moment.
Yep.
If you are not very much attached and you're willing to have some kind of weird state, like you can see there, you could move your site to the root and then another site to the root and then archive it, and then you would have different URL. It's kind of weird approach, but you could physically, it's possible.
That is true. Yes. Technically, it's possible.
Not
that wouldn't be
meant
physically.
To be used that way. Yeah.
That's not physical, right? Because that's virtual. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's possible. It's possible. Not meant to be used that way. Whether there are some side effects or not, I don't know. But in theory, you could move it from your site to the root and then archive it to another URL, and then you basically indirectly moved it from one URL to another.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And then there's a few constraints, which Mark is also defining here. Connected, it cannot be connected to a group, could be a hub site, or be associated to a hub site. This one in here, which you're moving. But then when you moved in, then you can able to associate that to be a hub site later.
So what kind? So it cannot be a modern site.
It can be a modern
site. A com site.
It can be a communication site. Yes.
Yeah, because modern team site by default has a group.
Correct. That is correct.
And you cannot create the no group site as a site collection.
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can have a modern team site experience without a group as well.
Okay, so you would create that and then use that as a, if you wanted that to be your,
if you want to have a team site experience, yes. Then obviously we want people to use more communication site for this kind of experience.
That makes sense, right? Yeah.
Yep. because it's the landing page of your company, so to say. And now, if you already have a classic team site or an existing team site in the root, then we have the enable, I can't remember what it was, enable SPO com site or something for the root, which is a one option. That is ongoing and planned to get actually released worldwide relatively soon as well.
Cool.
Cute, and there's a example video even from Todd Matsinski around this one. So, but really useful capability and available, and you need to also have a latest version of SharePoint Online Admin PowerShell. Which, by the way, if you are using SharePoint Online PowerShell, please use the PowerShell gallery version of things. We are still releasing MSIs for this one, but sooner or later we're not going to do that anymore because MSI-based delivery of PowerShell modules is just stupid, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it has its place when you are on premises in offline world.
Sure, absolutely. But
for SPO, which is online, well, it kind of defies the purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. I think that's it for the slides. For the slides.
For the slides, yes. These are the web slides.
Web slides, yes. Let me actually stop the recording, presenting, and we'll come in here. So just to clarify, it's interesting to see how the video will be stitched together. This is by design. So we're recording this before we are recording the intro with Jeremy Thake later today.
And so then we're going to go back to the future. And then going back, yes, and then attaching it, yes.
Yes. So we'll see how we are mixing our timelines on that. But what about you, Waldek? So first of all, thanks. Great to have you back. You were away for the family vacation for a while. Any big plans for this week?
I think so. This is the last week before coming weekend, we plan to release the version 2 of the Office 365 CLI. We've been working on it it feels like we've been doing that for quite some time. So we are finally at a spot. Vacation time is over. We let the Vesa 2 sit as a official beta for 2 months, where typically we release a version every month. So we've done it for 2 months, and now it's the time for V2. And we haven't heard anything that would prevent us from doing a release yet, knock on the wood. So if all is well, we will have a release this weekend. So that's probably the biggest thing on our agenda now. Other than that, just the business as usual.
Yep, makes perfect sense.
You? Any plans?
What do I have on my urgent table? There's some overall fiscal year planning objectives and budgeting and all of that stuff, which is not super fun. But we need to figure out what are we actually delivering, and from as a team perspective, as an SPFX team perspective, and also from an open source perspective of the house, and then to leadership articles and stuff, documents which I need to write to change some of the internal processes, but nothing super, let's say, dramatical for this week at least. So it seems.
SPFX v1.10 planning?
Well, that's already pretty much closed, so we know exactly what's coming. So that should be fine. Some of our team members are finalizing the 1.10 right now, and some are already thinking ahead and building the future of the model as well. So there should be interesting stuff announced in Ignite related on that one.
Cool.
But I can't disclose anything at this point.
No. And this year, Ignite has been pushed from originally September to what is it now?
November. That's actually a good point. I booked my yesterday my hotel for Ignite, and I'm still again on the same location, which I'm always, which is good. And then flights are organized as well. It's actually one of the things on the flights was that a lot of the flights, which I was trying to book last week, were basically through UK. So if you're heading to Ignite, you probably want to think about that option, because
unless you live in the UK.
2nd of October and 2nd of November, and if the Brexit will happen, it will happen on the last day of October.
Wow.
So
and you don't want to be a guinea pig for a new process that might not work. Like basically, it reminds me a lot of the Y2K bug. Like everybody's like, will it work? And then it did, but then you never know. Like, you don't want to be on the first batch of people going there.
Yep.
Yeah, it might be like there might be some side effects to it. Who knows?
Absolutely. I had few options through London and then Manchester, which would have been faster and easy, but then the transfer time inside of the UK was, what was it, 1.5 hours? It's like,
but I mean, now you have flight through Hawaii, right? So if
sure.
only.
No, I'm flying through Iceland, so Iceland has it's a good fast transfer as well, and super reliable. So that's really good. Cool. Anyway, hoping to see everybody in Ignite as well, who can actually make it. And congratulations for the Ignite speakers. That results came out actually last week. As
absolutely.
Well. That's really hard thing as well, because there's always people who get disappointed on not getting the speaking position, and then it's a balancing act of getting new fresh blood, but then required, let's say, stable, guaranteed speakers who are always delivering on the right level and all of that. So it's an interesting.
Plus, not to mention, there are only so many slots that are free.
There's only so many slots. That's
and in the end, like, you cannot have as much as you would probably love to have everybody. Like, it's physically impossible. There is just no room to accommodate all of that. So
absolutely. But cool. I think. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries. Go.
I think that's it for this one. Thank you, Jeremy Thake, for joining on a chat, and thank you everybody who contributed their articles and shared their knowledge for others in the community. We'll be back with the next one within a week, right?
If all is well.
Yes. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.